Hello and welcome to Nan Loves Food. I am Ann here today with a personal story about my weirdness with gluten. So let's go back to the very beginning. When I was very young, I always had gastrointestinal issues, like always. And we spoke to my family physician about it. We talked to him. I was born in '83, so I was growing up in the late '80s. We spoke to my doctor. And he told us that more than likely it was a lactose intolerance. Now, at that time, lactose intolerance was a relatively new diagnosis. Like, that wasn't something that was commonplace. And so he was kind of on the cutting edge telling me that it might be lactose. So I did what you would do if you thought you were lactose intolerant. I stopped eating dairy, which dairy is like my favorite. I really love dairy. I really love cheese specifically. Cut out the cheese, cut out the yogurt, cut out the milk, stopped with all of it, and I still had gastrointestinal issues. I took Lactaid, I avoided that stuff for a while until I decided, you know what, this isn't making any difference at all, but not having cheese in my life is making me sad. So I went back to eating dairy. Pretty confident that lactose intolerance was not actually what was wrong with me. About the time I was graduating from college, my best friend's mom found out that she was gluten intolerant. And I thought, well, I'm still having these issues. I've had them since I was a child. I know there is something not right. And my doctor, who I had told that I was still having issues, didn't know what to tell me. In retrospect, I probably should have gone to see an allergist, but when you're a kid, you don't know that stuff, right? Like, you're just doing what you can do. So I read up a bunch on gluten intolerance and what that was and what that meant. And it turns out that gluten intolerance is actually relatively common. So as you may know, gluten is a protein that is found in lots of carby, delicious things. Also, it's found in a lot of processed foods. I read, and what I was told is that if you go 30 days without eating gluten and you eat gluten again and you get sick, more than likely you have a gluten intolerance. So that's what I did. I figured, what have I got to lose? Let me go ahead and give this a go. And so in my early 20s, I stopped eating gluten for a while, and then I started and got super, super, super sick. And I was like, you know what? This must be it. It can take a long time for gluten to get out of your system, specifically because it's a kind of a sticky protein. It can hang out in there for a while. That's why you have to wait 30 days. It's not like a week or whatever. So you really have to flush it out. I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that not eating gluten, I felt a lot better. So I lived my life as a gluten-free person would. I made sure that every vacation I went on, every restaurant I went to, every vacation I went on, every family gathering I went to, hey, bride who's getting married, I can't eat your cake. Do you have anything else I can eat? Being gluten intolerant is a giant pain in the butt. So is getting sick all the time. And to me, there is no question in my mind that a little bit of inconvenience for myself and other people has nothing on not being sick constantly, right? One of the things I wanted to address in this video is kind of the shame around just food intolerances in general. I have had people be so shitty to me because I'm sick, because there is this thing that makes me sick. And in whatever context, whether you are a server at a restaurant or a family member who's having a wedding, whatever that is, I've had people be so awful to me. Like, I made this choice in life to have an intolerance to this thing that I would really love to eat. I would really, really love to eat your birthday cake or your wedding cake. Quite frankly, cake is one of my just all-time favorite things. I love a good birthday cake. Like, white with buttercream frosting. I mean, come on. Who doesn't want to eat that? But I was willing to cut it out forever because it was making me not as sick. So I just want to say, if you were someone who is dealing with food intolerances or you know someone with a food intolerance, please, please give them grace. This sucks so much more for them than it does for you. So just try not to be a jerk because they would probably like to eat your birthday cake too. So that being said, I was still getting tummy troubles. I can tell you that they were infinitely better when I wasn't eating gluten. And I would still occasionally like have a piece of pizza and get sick, like have a piece of real pizza. Gluten-free substitutes are just missing gluten. And if you've ever tried like a gluten-free pizza, it just pales in comparison to the real thing. The chew that comes from gluten that it provides in things like French bread and pizza, like that just cannot be replaced. There are some things that you can make good substitutions for, like a brownie that's gluten-free. You don't really miss it because you don't need that texture. But there are just certain applications like a croissant, any manner of like flaky pastry situation. All of those things are just made infinitely better by the protein that is gluten. I found a digestive enzyme that I would take from time to time where I would take the enzyme, I would eat gluten, and I would be less sick than I would if I didn't take the enzyme. So it wasn't that I wasn't sick, and it never was anywhere near 100% reliable. Like, we're talking maybe 25% chance of getting sick instead of 100, which in some cases I'll take, right? In some cases it's just worth it to have that thing that you're not supposed to have and risk it. Like, roll the dice and know that it's potential for you to get sick, but maybe not. And so this is going to give you that choice. These digestive enzymes were very expensive, and for the most part they worked. So no complaints from me. But I was still getting sick sometimes. I had theorized that maybe I had something else that was making me sick in addition to gluten, but I was sure it was gluten because every time I had gluten, I got sick. So as I've gone through my life as a woman in America, obviously I've been on 100 diets. I don't know many women who haven't. And I found that particularly when I was doing a low carb diet, that I would get really, really sick. Like, I really just constantly uncomfortable, bloaty tummy trouble, just like bad news. And it didn't make sense to me because a low carb diet is obviously the exact opposite of eating a bunch of gluten. So why was that the thing that was making me sick? So that's always bothered me in the back of my head. And it's like, okay, for a while you can say, all right, maybe it's a carb withdrawal situation, but it was very much more than that. So enter 2020, where we've got a lot more time than normal to be home. And I was just tired of feeling cruddy. So enter 2020, where we have a lot more time to read. And that was one of the ways that I spent a lot of time in the year 2020. I am a huge fan of audiobooks. I listen to them while walking the dog, while playing in the garden, while doing household tasks, whatever that may be. And so I chewed through some books in 2020. And one of them was this book, The Bad Food Bible, How and Why to Eat Sinfully by Dr. Aaron Carroll. I actually saw this author speak on a YouTube channel, and I was compelled by a lot of what he had to say. You know, the idea of eating sinfully is something that really both interests and appeals to me. I think we've done a lot in society to vilify foods, and I just wanted to hear what he had to say. It seemed compelling. He seemed like a very intelligent person. He's obviously a medical doctor. And while you can't actually see my fancy degrees, those are both degrees. And that one is from the same place where he practices medicine. So he's at Indiana University, which is where I went to my undergrad. And it seemed worth listening to what he had to say. So I read the book. Highly, highly recommend this book. If you have any interest in science or medicine, but like me, have 0 degrees in it. Like, my C- in chemistry is as close as I went to med school. I was never going to be a candidate for that. But the beginning of the book, he talks a lot about studies, which is fascinating to me because I know nothing about medical studies. That's not an area that I've spent any time exploring personally. But, you know, you see these studies that, you know, get reported in the news and experts say, and this study proves that if you chew bubblegum before every meal or whatever ridiculous thing, you're going to lose 15 pounds. Or, you know, you see all these claims, apple cider vinegar cures everything. And we did one study to figure out how. And so the first part of the book is him breaking down how those studies work and how some are infinitely more reliable than others and kind of how to tell the difference of that. So as he goes through the book and discusses different types of sinful eating, he qualifies the study before talking about them at all, which I super appreciate, by saying it's this kind of study, this is the result they got, or it was this kind of paper that combined all of these studies, and this is the result that we can conclude based on that information. And one of the things that I didn't realize as a layperson who does not study medicine in any capacity, that a lot of the studies that we have, even though it seems like we have a ton of studies on all the things and they're all pointing in different directions, the world of nutrition is actually a very, very difficult thing to do studies on. They're very expensive, and there actually isn't a ton of reliable data out there. Like, the body of studies that actually exists is pretty small, which if you open up the New York Times, you wouldn't know that, right? Because all these studies say all these different things. So I'm reading through this book and I'm like, yeah, this guy, smart things. I like it. And then he gets to the chapter on gluten. And he, just like he did in the rest of the book, qualifies all these studies, says, these were the studies, this is what they found. And with gluten specifically, gluten intolerance, what the studies found that he cited in this book, a lot of the people who thought that they were gluten intolerant, when they were given gluten, unbeknownst to them, didn't actually have any additional symptoms. These were pretty reliable studies that were done, and these were people who thought that they had gluten intolerance. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird, but that's not me. I know that I'm gluten intolerant because I've done all these tests to see, for me, what works and what doesn't. And I want to make a point to say that I had gone back to my family doctor, the same one who told me that I was lactose intolerant, and let him know. I said, hey, listen, when I was kind of first figuring out the gluten thing, that was what I thought was making me sick, I went to him. I went to my medical professional and I said, hey, listen, I think this might be the thing that's been causing my issue. And he looked at me all but pissed off and said, well, you're not celiac. I never said I was celiac. I said that I think I'm pretty sure I'm gluten intolerant. And he was like, whatever. Like, he totally wrote off my own thing. And it makes me so mad because just because I am young and just because I am a woman and just because I have this theory, like, as my medical professional, you're supposed to listen to me, right? You're supposed to, I know my body and I know that I'm getting sick and I know that I shouldn't be sick all the time. So dude, it's your job to help me figure out why. I had tried to get the support of medical professionals. And when I had spoken to chiropractors, like non-traditional medicine, they're like, oh yeah, it's definitely gluten, right? So neither that like Western medicine of not listening to you, I'm not going to help you, to the Eastern medicine of, yeah, listen to your body, that's what it is. Neither of them actually hit the nail on the head. And I think by the title of this video, you kind of know where this is going, right? Like, after reading this book, it really made me question whether or not I was actually gluten intolerant. And so what I did is I went out and I got one of those Everlywell tests, which I'll leave my link down in the description below. This is not sponsored by them, but I just wanted to do some reassurance because now, as a normal human, can order these tests for myself. I'm not beholden to medical professionals who do not listen to me. And so I was like, you know what? I'll spend the $100 or whatever it was, and I'll just see. And then I'll know beyond a shadow of a doubt that that is the thing that is making me sick. And if there's something else that test gets, cool. So the way it works is you prick your finger and you just like bleed on a little card and you mail the card back in and they do this test. And it is to measure sensitivities, not allergies, which that's a whole thing. If you're looking for a rabbit hole to go down, that's an interesting one, but I'm not going to spend the time in this video here talking about that because it's a whole thing. But I got the test back after a week of like anxiously waiting. Please give me my results now, please. Like, I was so nervous because when you've believed something about yourself for over a decade, that's part of who you are. Like, that, it becomes a part of your identity. It's kind of like how you introduce yourself in the world, how you interact in the world is based on these fundamental truths. And I got my test back and it was like almost zero sensitivity to gluten. And I was shocked. Like, truly, deeply, like, identity crisis shocked. And I know that might sound a little stupid, but seriously, like, it had become part of my identity. However, while gluten was very low, three things that were relatively high were eggs, baker's yeast, and brewer's yeast. If you think about baking and gluten and all of the things that go into a lot of the dishes that we eat with gluten, there's also egg in there, and there's also yeast in there. So way back when I did my experiment and I didn't eat gluten for 30 days and I ate gluten again, it made me sick, but it wasn't the gluten that was making me sick. It was actually the yeast that was making me sick in that pizza. So like, right? Like, I am not a medical doctor. I did read up on sensitivities versus allergies. And I did want to make sure that I didn't have an allergy to gluten, which would be different than a sensitivity to gluten, and it's tested in a different way. So I did go get some blood work done to verify that I didn't have any allergies, and that all came back as one would expect. I don't actually have allergies other than seasonal allergies, which I knew that one. I'm allergic to fall. So it's kind of incredible that you can go your entire life, not your entire life. I went most of my adult life believing that I was gluten intolerant. And part of that is because I didn't have medical professionals to back me up. And so I would urge you, if you're in a situation where you're having those digestive issues, you're bloating, your tummy hurts, things aren't digesting the way that they need to, whatever that looks like for you, if you can't get help from your medical professionals, take one of these tests and see. It would be irresponsible of me to say that these tests are 100% valid. I know that from the perspective of the medical community that a lot of these tests are kind of scammy, but what I have done is I have eliminated yeast and egg from my diet and have noticed an extraordinary difference in how I feel. I will occasionally eat egg, I will occasionally eat yeast, and I know almost immediately that I have made a bad life choice, and my body lets me know in no uncertain terms that it does not like what I did there. And so I'm just in a position where I'm going to avoid those things moving forward most of the time. And birthday cake still has egg in it, darn it. So I'm going to eat birthday cake from time to time, or I'll make my own and make sure that it doesn't have egg. So as I wrap up this video, I want to reiterate a couple of things. Number one is nobody chooses to have a food allergy or intolerance. And there is no need to guilt or shame or pretend to be put out or be put out by something that is not a choice for people with these allergies or intolerances. Be kind, be patient. It sucks worse for them than it does for you. Number two, if you feel bad and you are not getting the help that you need from a doctor or a medical professional, go find somebody else's opinion. We live in a world with so many options. The internet has provided us so many choices that we never had before. If you're in a position where you aren't being listened to, find somebody else who will listen. Be an advocate for yourself. You do not have to live your life feeling sick. And finally, and most importantly, give yourself grace. We are all trying to figure out this life thing together, and it is more complicated than any of us knew. There was a large part of me that didn't want to even find out that I wasn't gluten intolerant. There was a piece of me that was scared to find out that it wasn't gluten that was making me sick, which is kind of weird, but it felt shameful in a way that I had conned people into this, almost like I had conned people into this thing that I found out recently isn't true. It's a weird place to be. And so if you're in one of these positions where you thought something was true and maybe it's not as true as you thought it was, or maybe it's true for a different reason, give yourself grace. We're all just trying to figure it out, and it can be really easy to be super hard on yourself. You don't need to be, and it doesn't actually help anybody for you to be hard on yourself. So be kind, get the help that you need, and treat yourself with the love and respect you deserve. If you have any questions, for me, go ahead and leave them down in the comments. I'd be happy to chat about this a little bit more. It's been a really strange ride, and if you watch my very first video on this channel, I actually introduced myself as a person who is gluten intolerant because I believed I was when I made that video. It was a few short months after that video was recorded that I found out that it was actually the eggs and the yeast making me sick. So I'll get to updating that video eventually. That's not a priority for me right now. But if you've made it to the end, thank you for being here. I so appreciate it. If you would be so kind as to give this video a thumbs up, it really helps me out. And go ahead and make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching today. I'll see you later. Bye.